up, cousin? Welcome to CoCo Conjure. Here we talk about all things hoodoo, folklore, and spiritual journeys. My goal is to give foundation to the novice and inspiration to the advanced practitioner. If you have not guessed already, my name is CoCo. Cousin, I am so blessed to have you here with me today. Please be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe wherever you are listening. In this episode, I am finally going to talk about the Psalms, and honestly, the Bible in its entirety as the possible spell book of hoodoo. I know that sounds a bit odd coming from this very pagan roots lady, but I cannot deny that most of my life I've seen the elders of my family use the wisdom found within the Bible combined with their own faith in the Abrahamic God to do good work for themselves and others. So grab your book of Psalms or the family Bible and let's get a little biblical. All right. First, let us address the elephant in the room, cousin. The Bible and Christianity as a whole takes up space in hoodoo. There, I said it. I know I upset some of you, but stay with me, okay? I said it, and I mean I'm standing 10 toes down on it. During one of the spiritual conferences I went to last year, Dr. Beverly explained that hoodoo is inexplicably connected to the Abrahamic God and the Bible and how that connects with the Black people of America. And that even if we don't want that to be the case, truth and facts are truth and facts, right? She said that our more recent ancestors would have latched on to verses such as Genesis 1:29, chapter 1, verse 29 through 30. It reads, "And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed." Now, she stopped there when she was giving her talk, but I'm going to continue the verse. It continues, "Which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, and the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat, and to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat." And it was so. Right? A passage like this, taken at face value, says that everything on this earth was given to us for use of nourishment. But mix that with an animistic viewpoint, a viewpoint, I remind you, would have been very prevalent in the earliest of Bond's people in the United States. You could say that the God of Abraham gave us all we needed to provide nourishment both physically and spiritually. Animistic perspective. What am I talking about? So an animistic perspective would tell us that everything on this earth has spirit, life, purpose. Even that is backed up biblically. Okay. In Isaiah 45:18, it says, "For thus saith the Lord that created the heavens, God himself that formed the earth and made it. He hath established it. He created it not in vain. He formed it to be inhabited. I am the Lord, and there is none else." That's Isaiah 45:18. So with all the thuses and the theys and the thous, the meaning can get kind of lost. But basically it's saying that the God of Abraham himself formed the earth, made it to give life, to go in this cycle of life and death, to support life. He created it not in vain. He formed it to be inhabited. That means that everything on this earth has a purpose, has meaning. Just like our animistic perspective of that we hold now and that our ancestors would have held, there's spirit all around us. Everything here has purpose and meaning. And pair that with the first verse, we have the authority to use it. We have the authority on this earth to use what is around us to support ourselves physically, spiritually, mentally. To go even a step further, the Bible also has 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3, right? That says, "According as his divine power hath given unto us all things that pertain unto life and godliness, through the knowledge of him that hath called us to glory and virtue. Basically, God, the Abrahamic God, has given all of us what we need to live a glorious and fulfilling life, as long as you hold space for him in your own spirit. So you combine these three verses, right? All that is on the earth has meaning, purpose. Every herb, every tree, every animal has meaning and purpose, right? And these things should be used to support yourself physically, spiritually, for nourishment, right? And glory is yours to find if you hold that knowledge and that power to be true, right? You get all of that and you have a very Christian-centered hoodoo practice. That is why my grandmother, who is a devout faith woman, will also tell me that, you know, the government doesn't want you to know, but if you could go into the forest and find that life everlasting plant. That's how the old people back in her day used to solve problems, used to cure ailments. Or if you could go, and find someone who knew, they could tell you a chapter and verse in the Bible and the candle to light and the bath to take, and that would make sure that you're fertile. Or if you find someone with the wisdom who knew, who had the knowledge, the power, the understanding, they could go into the forest and come back and give you an herb to make a paste out of and smear on wounds and boils, all sorts of things. Even this devout faith Christian woman still holds this space that us as spiritual people would call hoodoo. It even feeds into respectability politics, right? This idea that as long as the power is coming through God, like that third verse said, then it's permittable, right? So you can still be the root lady and you can still be the conjure man, but they would say, oh, well, my power comes through God and I use this biblical text in my work. So I personally do not think we should confuse our magic with any particular religion, Christianity or otherwise, but that's my own personal belief. As Black American folk magic practitioners, our hoodoo is rooted in many customs and traditions as filtered by the Black experience, just as us as people are a melting pot of various African nations and New World influences. But I will confess that Christianity and later Jewish mysticism play a part in how our magic took root and grew in America. It's just as influential on our folk practice, on hoodoo, as anything else. And if that's the case, then we can use aspects of Christian faith, particularly the holy text, to our advantage. And it gets used like that all the time, right? The wisdom found within the Bible gets used in hoodoo all the time. It does not mean, like I heard someone said, oh, that just makes you Christian. No. Mm-mm. There are plenty of Christians on this planet who would never use the Bible in the way in which it is used in hoodoo. They would never, ever think to use the Bible and the Psalms and whatever chapter and verse paired with this herb for this bath, paired with, this rite as some sort of spell or spiritual work. They wouldn't do that. They lean away from the magic. They lean away from the wisdom and lean more towards their faith. Now, a lot of us in the hoodoo space want to reach for the more Africanisms of our folk magic. And you know what? That is understandable. It's totally understandable. Besides our current day church wounds, Christianity, right, was used as a justification for the enslavement of our ancestors. And thus, hoodoo, as well as any other ATR, can be used to build a spiritual worldview that we lost within our culture. But it's also undeniable, cousin, that Christianity played just as much a role in our freedom, spiritual upliftment, and continued quest for equality. It's a double-edged sword like that. The same Bible that was mined for wisdom and told the colonizers that they, as good Christian white folks, had the God-given right to subjugate anyone who did not look like them or believe like them, as long as they didn't partake in the more unsavory sins that result from subjugating humans, is the same Bible and faith that inspired Harriet Tubman and Nat Turner and Frederick Douglass and the Quakers and other unnamed abolitionists to fight for the souls of black folks and push for our freedoms while most of our ancestors were still in bondage. Because if Moses was able to lead his people to freedom, then so could Harriet. So could Nat. So could Frederick. And if the only thing a slave owned was his God-given soul, then that soul should be treated as something precious, just like the rest of God's creation. It's the same Bible that inspired a host of civil rights leaders like MLK to push for equality. It's the same Bible and faith that inspires current day church leaders like, what's his name? Reverend Raphael Warnock to become a senator. So whether we like it or not, in our diaspora, we were centered around the church. We were centered around biblical teachings at its earliest times. We just absorbed it differently than the colonizers would have liked. Right? Is the Bible problematic? Yeah. Yes. In my opinion, the Bible is problematic and antiquated to how we live our life now. The laws and rules don't make sense to the earth we live on today. But the Bible does hold the mythology of an oppressed people fighting for their existence and doing their best to define how to exist. It holds a chapter and verse that promises freedom and peace and abundance. It gives us a snapshot of what we as spiritual workers would identify as more ancient magic practices. And most importantly, the wisdom found inside the Bible, the text itself, is malleable. It's malleable to any situation you need it to fit. There's a chapter and a verse to back up every spiritual claim I'm making, as well as to back up all the religious dogma that has followed. And because it's malleable, because it has been held sacred for so long, there have been people who have prayed this, every verse, every chapter of that Bible, who have sought freedom and love and peace and abundance and justice by simply saying the words found within the text. And there is power in that. There, you guys, the more spiritual of you would say there's an energy in it, right, that can be tapped into. I don't speak that way. I get what you're saying, but to me, the words themselves hold power. They hold every dream and wish and the spiritual power of everyone who's ever said those words before us when we decide to utilize it in our practice. That is, if you decide to use it, if you decide to use the power at your disposal, as all the other hoodoos have done before us. I understand why you might not want to. But for me, as a non-Christian, I hold the Bible as sacred. I don't need to believe in the God in order to know that there's power in the text. Like I've said, I've seen my grandma, my mom, my great-grandma sit on the edge of their bed in meditation over scripture, or repeat scripture like an incantation. My mom's favorite verse to say during moments when she's crossed up or facing down a very serious adversary. And I don't even know if she can tell you the chapter and verse, but it's Isaiah 54:17. No weapon formed against me shall prosper. And cousin, that's not even the entire verse, right? But it's all she needs before she goes into battle against anyone or anything standing in her way. Not a candle being lit, no 7 herb bath, just no weapon that is formed against me shall prosper. I remember sitting on my great grandmother's porch and her reciting to me 1 Peter 5:7. It's 5:7. Cast all your cares upon him because he cares for you. Actually, it would have been the King James Version. So cast all your care upon him, for he careth. Gotta have that careth. He careth for you. She told me to highlight it in the Bible that she gave to me to carry around that verse or the Bible itself to give me strength. She ingrained this verse so deeply in my spirit that it was a verse I chose when I was confirmed in church. I made this verse my 5th grade class banner. If I were to pull out my great grandmother's Bible, the Bible she gave me, if I was to pull it out right now and flip it open, I promise you, it would flip automatically to that verse. Cast all your care upon him, for he careth for you. For me, I've stopped casting my cares upon a him. For me, there is no him, no God that I need to commune with. But I still hold that verse sacred. It was a wisdom that was passed down to me. And now when I'm anxious or upset, I write it down. I cast my cares away from me. Then I bury the paper at the base of a tree, or I throw it into water that's running away from me if I'm like at a creek or something going for a walk. If it's too cold outside, I will write that verse on toilet paper and then flush it down the toilet. So that way my cares are sent away from me through the public septic system. There is no way you can tell me I cannot use that verse. Right? It's a wisdom that was passed down to me, so I can use it. So yeah, I understand why it's hard to think of the Bible as a spell book, right? Especially if you're not Christian, right? I get it, but it is one. You can use it as one, because whatever you're looking for, whatever prayer you need prayed, whatever justification you need to find, you can find it in that Bible, right? If you are a Christian, then the power of God found within that Bible, plus the mundane world that was gifted to us, can fuel your practice. And if you're like me, as pagan as you want to be, then it's the power of the words. It's the way those prayers have been prayed across centuries. The connection that Bible has to our ancestors, and the magical practices that are in fact detailed within that can aid in your spell work, because there is always a chapter and a verse that will pertain to your needs. Okay, that's enough of me waxing on about the why. What you really came for is the how. First thing you need to understand is that when you do spiritual work, you'll want to use the King James Version of the Bible. Is this version problematic? A problematic translation? Sure is. It's missing passages. It misconstrues the old Latin, and there are things that are added and taken out within at the whim of King James himself, right? However, it's not about the translation. It's about the usage that this version has in our community. Our more recent ancestors held the KJV, the King James Version, as the GOAT standard. Even now, you walk into a black church and I'd bet money that it's a KJV in the pews in front of you. So if you want to utilize the Bible in your hoodoo practice, get you the King James Version. Second thing you need to know is that in hoodoo, the entire Bible is useful. However, the book of Psalms is the most used. It's 150 chapters of poetic power. And whatever your ailment, whatever spiritual work you want to carry out, there is a psalm to address it. Top 4 psalms I can think of off the top of my head. Psalm 23 for sure. I consider this psalm a catch-all. Not sure which psalm to use? Psalm 23 will cover your bases. It protects, it blesses. My grandma used to have this psalm hanging next to the door when I was growing up. Blessed when you're coming in, blessed when you're going out. You can sing it. There's a song called Blessings on Blessings by Anthony Brown that's basically reciting Psalm 23. My sister and I sang it over my mother after she had surgery and before she had surgery. I sing it when I feed my money spirit pot. Psalm 23. Total catch-all psalm for sure. The next psalm I can think of is Psalm 35. Psalm 35 can be used in reversal work, court case work, or legal battles, and to unmask enemies parading as friends. You can pair this with candle work or carry it as a talisman when entering situations where justice is your goal. And I'm going to tell you now, that's all psalms really. You can do candle work, spiritual baths. You can write it down like my great grandmother told me and put it in your pocket or on you to keep with you. As like a magical talisman. That's not just hoodoo either. Back in the ancient days, right, in Rome and moving forward, The Bible itself, the text itself, was considered sacred, considered magical, right? So if you wrote down a verse and on a tablet and carried it with you, or you etched it in copper and wore it as a necklace, or you had sayings on the floor, in the floors of your house or above your door, or you actually carried the text with you and touched it to your head. Like, the Bible itself is considered a magical talisman, right? So if you want to take parts, write it down. If you have a special ink, dragon's blood ink, if you want to, special parchment you want to use, it doesn't matter. You can take that and use any of these psalms, any psalm really, as a talisman to carry with you. What was I talking about? Okay, Psalms. Psalm 51. Psalm 51 is for cleansing and uncrossing. It pairs very well with spiritual baths. So as you prepare the bath, you can say the entire chapter or pick a verse that best suits your needs. An uncrossing bath that I have done before, I did with Psalm 51, 7-10. It says, "Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Make me to hear joy and gladness, that the bones which thou hast broken may rejoice. Create in me a clean heart, and renew a right spirit within me." Right? So remember, before I was talking about there's ancient magic kind of sprinkled within this text. This is one of them. Purge me with hyssop. Everyone's reaching for the sage. Meanwhile, hyssop is right there. Right? And this psalm, this chapter and verse tells us that hyssop used in a spiritual bath can literally cleanse you, can cleanse your spirit, can make you to hear joy and gladness. And any of those bones that are broken, any of those wounds that need to be healed can be healed over, right? It can create in you a clean heart, and it can renew your spirit. There it is. There's the ancient magic I'm talking about. So when I use it in a bath, I only used hyssop, which is a move for me. Because like I said, I've said before, if you've been here before, I always do things in threes, right? 3 herbs, 3 oils, whatever. So this was a one ingredient bath for me. And I would move the water from my forehead to my foot for 3 nights. There's the 3. I did it for 3 nights. But as I was preparing the bath, I would read that verse. And on the morning after the 3rd night, I tossed some of that leftover bath water from every bath out of my patio door, What's another one? Psalm 91 for divine protection. You can place Psalm 91 written above your door to bless your home, or pair it with a floor wash by reciting the psalm over the floor wash, or reciting it as you cleanse your floors and your walls. You can place a written copy of Psalm 91 under your pillow to stop nightmares or to get some peaceful sleep. It also pairs very well with fiery wall of protection oil. So as you're creating the oil itself, or if you're administering the oil, you would recite Psalm 91. And of course, you can just write it down and keep it in any place where you need divine protection. So, you worried about your money floating away or somebody crossing up your money, put it in your wallet. If you need protection from some scrub or some whoever that's out there that's trying to suck you dry, put it in your breast pocket or put it in your bra, that totally works. Of course, there are more than Psalms that can be used. I've already told you about how I use 1 Peter 5:7 when my spirit is heavy. And how my mom uses Isaiah 54:17 to rebuke anything standing in her way of victory. And this woman will shout it, I'm telling you, at the top of her lungs. When you're doing love drawing work, be that a mojo, a candle, or a bath, you can pair it with any verse from the Song of Solomon or Song of Songs. A verse that I can think of that comes to mind is Song of Solomon 1:2. Chapter 1, verse 2. It's an easy one. It says, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is better than wine." Right? There are a lot more verses from the Song of Solomon or for Song of Songs for love work, for binding work. So don't be afraid to read around until you find something that speaks to you. The last thing you have to remember as you move forward is that the Bible, the text in the Bible, those words have power. When we speak them or we write them down, we engage our spirit. Think of those who prayed so hard that they literally start speaking in tongues. They have no other way to express their spirit other than with raw sound at a certain point. So in hoodoo, you have to do more than just read the chapter and verse. You have to read it, recite it, till it feels like it's the absolute truth. Pair that type of spiritual engagement with words that have been prayed over generations, and your work is very sure to be powerful. Thank you, everybody who's made it this far in the podcast. Please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe if you are listening. Wherever you are listening, I'm sure there's a button you can hit. We've reached the point in the podcast where I read a question I found online and then try to answer it. This question comes from a hoodoo Facebook group, Uncle Leroy's Corner. I love that place. It says, is there a specific way to read Psalms for prayer and spell work, or are we supposed to read it as is? I find myself getting stuck on certain parts, like do I ever substitute I or me for certain parts, etc. I find myself a little confused about who they're speaking on. As far as God, I like creator, but IDK if this takes away from the magic when you change the words up. Also, can we speak these prayers for others, like in our spiritual businesses and services? All right. Well, we already talked about reading the Psalms or any verse really like it's your truth, and I stand by that. You want to read it like a truth. In order to get yourself there, sometimes you do have to change the wording or substitute titles a little bit. I don't believe in, well, it's not that I don't believe, I don't follow the Abrahamic God. So you'll hear me choose verses that just straight up don't mention God in them, or I'll omit God, or I will substitute it for ancestors or spirits or things like that. For example, Psalm 23 starts with, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I may instead say something like, I am shepherded and I shall not want, or I am guided and I shall not want. It doesn't lose, or the spirit is my shepherd. The spirits are my shepherd and I shall not want. It doesn't lose its potency to me because when I say it, that's the truth, right? I have spirits that guide me, ancestors to follow. So I am shepherded through life. I am guided. I am not Christian. I am not going to invoke the Abrahamic God in my work. I want the chapter and the verse for the power and beauty in the words. The key is to not change too much, though, or it's going to lose its original meaning and power. You want to keep the same rhythm of the verse. Like if you're making chicken noodle soup and you're using chicken thighs instead of chicken breast, you still have chicken noodle soup, right? But if you're making chicken noodle soup and you start using beef cubes, you don't got chicken noodle soup anymore, right? You can also substitute out pronouns for proper nouns. Like, so you're doing that love attraction work and you decide to use that Song of Solomon verse I talked about that says, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is better than wine, right? You would say something like, let Sally kiss me with the kisses of her mouth, for Sally's love is better than wine. Or if you're doing it for someone else, you would say, let Sally kiss John with the kisses of her mouth, for Sally's love is better than wine. So by doing that, I'm targeting the work a little more clearly. I'm making sure that it's in alignment. The verse, the chapter and verse is in more alignment than to the work I'm doing. And that's very common with Bible work. And yes, you can definitely, I'm sure many people over the centuries have prayed prayers out of the Bible for other people. So yes, you can use it in your businesses and services as well. Easy. All right, cousin. You've reached the end of the podcast. Thank you so much for staying with me for as long as you have. I know I was waxing a little philosophical a lot earlier, but it needed to be talked about, I think. It needs to be talked about how, as much as those of us entering into more spiritual spaces are kind of recovering from church hurt or would like to leave the Christianity behind us, we have to acknowledge the fact that Christianity has a heavy influence on hoodoo, right? And if you want to, the tools of Christianity are at your disposal. The Bible itself as a spell book is at your disposal. But before we get out of here, cousin, I want to let you know that you deserve the world. Okay? You deserve all the good things. Speak good things over yourself. That is the easiest form of spiritual work, of spell work I can think of. Speaking good things over yourself. Believing those words to be the absolute truth. Pick a psalm that resonates with you so deeply that you can recite a word or two when you're in trouble or when you need upliftment. Okay? And know that, cousin, when you recite that psalm and you call for your power and you call for your blessings will come to you. I'll see you guys next time.